The scene opens with a jarring visual contrast. The high-polished, heavy boots of Officer Brian Whitman planted firmly on the sidewalk, looming over the rubber tires of Marcus Johnson's motorized wheelchair. The air is thick with the smell of scorched brake pads and spilled espresso. Whitman's shadow completely engulfs Marcus, creating a claustrophobic cage of authority. The officer's hand rests with practiced arrogance on his utility belt as he barks a command for Marcus to clear the zone, entirely unaware that the man he is treating as a sidewalk obstruction is currently the most dangerous person in the city to his career. We are introduced to Marcus Johnson through a lens of deceptive stillness. To the bustling morning crowd at the daily grind, he is a sympathetic figure, a gray-haired man in a windbreaker, paralyzed and seemingly at the mercy of the elements. However, the narrative pulls us into Marcus's internal world, where his mind remains an elite weapon. He isn't just sitting. He is observing the street with a tactical precision honed over decades of federal service. He notes the tell in a passerby's gait and the suspicious frequency of a specific patrol car. He is enjoying the simple, hard-earned luxury of a quiet coffee, a piece he bought with a bullet to the spine. This tranquility is violently punctured by the sudden, aggressive mounting of the curb by a cruiser. The high-pitched whine of the patrol car's engine acts as the starting pistol for a confrontation Marcus has been waiting for, turning a peaceful morning into a high-stakes psychological trap. Marcus didn't move as the dust from the cruiser's tires settled onto the surface of his cooling coffee. He simply counted the beats of his own heart, keeping the rhythm steady, a habit from a former life where a spike in adrenaline could be a death sentence. Before the wheelchair, before the daily grind became his morning sanctuary, Marcus Johnson had been the ghost in the machine of the Bureau's elite counter-terrorism unit. He was the man who sat in sweat-soaked rooms in Istanbul and sterile bunkers in D.C., dismantling cells with the surgical precision of a grandmaster. His mornings now were a different kind of mission. He would wake at 5 o'clock, the phantom itch in his legs a constant reminder of the raid in 12 that had traded his mobility for the lives of 4 hostages. He followed a strict regimen, checking the regional intelligence briefs he still had backdoor access to, maintaining his specialized chair, and then positioning himself here at the corner of 5th and Main. To the world he was a relic. To himself he was a tripwire. He knew that if you stayed in the journey long enough, the truth eventually revealed itself. If you found value in watching this quiet sentinel hold his ground, perhaps you'll choose to stay with us by liking this story as we move deeper into the shadows. Officer Brian Whitman didn't see a veteran, he saw a target. From the driver's seat of Unit 402, Whitman scanned the sidewalk with a hungry, predatory gaze. He had been on a hot streak 4 months, his pockets lined with the seizure tax he levied against those too small to fight back. He liked this neighborhood, the historic district, because the contrast of a man in a wheelchair against the pristine brickwork made his skin crawl. It was an aesthetic blemish on his kingdom. Whitman had circled the block 3 times, noting the way the barista, Sarah, brought Marcus a fresh cup without being asked. He hated the familiarity of it. In Whitman's world there were those who gave orders and those who scurried. He adjusted his sunglasses, the reflection showing a man who felt untouchable, shielded by a badge that had long since lost its shine. He put the cruiser in gear, the engine growling as he prepared to manufacture a conflict where none existed. "I won't tell you again, Pop. This isn't a parking lot for the broken," Whitman barked, his voice echoing off the cafe's glass front. He stepped into Marcus's personal space, the leather of his duty belt creaking, a sound meant to intimidate. Marcus looked up, his expression as unreadable as a desert horizon. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't have to. "I'm a paying customer, Officer Whitman," Marcus said, the mention of the name causing the younger man to stiffen. Whitman's eyes narrowed behind his shades. He hadn't introduced himself. "The sidewalk is 6 feet wide. My chair occupies 28 inches. By my math, that leaves plenty of room for the law to pass by." Whitman leaned in, the smell of cheap cigarettes and aggression rolling off him. "I decide what the math is. Right now you're loitering. You're a hazard. And I'm starting to wonder what you've got tucked under that blanket that makes you so bold. Maybe some digital evidence? Or just a bitter old man looking for a fight?" The air turned electric as Whitman reached down, not for his cuffs, but for the joystick of Marcus's chair. It was a violation of the most fundamental kind, taking a man's only means of movement. "Since you won't move, I'll help you," Whitman sneered. "Don't touch the controls, Brian," Marcus warned, his voice dropping an octave into a tone that had once made hardened informants tremble. But Whitman was beyond listening. He yanked the joystick sharply to the left. The high-torque motors hissed in protest, and the heavy frame of the chair lurched. Because Marcus was paralyzed from the waist down, he couldn't brace himself. The chair hit the uneven curb and tipped. Time seemed to slow as Marcus was cast out of the seat, his body hitting the pavement with a sickening thud, the espresso cup shattering beside his head. Marcus lay on the rough concrete, his cheek pressed against the grit of the city he had served. Whitman didn't offer a hand. Instead, he dropped a heavy knee into the small of Marcus's back, right over the scar tissue of the bullet wound. "Stop resisting." Whitman screamed for the benefit of the gathering crowd, though Marcus was motionless. As Whitman wrenched Marcus's arms behind his back, he didn't notice the small, ruggedized smartphone clipped to the side of the overturned chair. Marcus' thumb had swiped a hidden sequence on his smartwatch the moment the chair tipped. The phone was now a cloning beacon, its high-frequency signal leaping to Whitman's personal device, vacuuming up encrypted messages, bank transfers, and the dark secrets of the Blue Squad. Even as the steel cuffs bit into Marcus's wrists, the digital noose was tightening around Whitman's neck. Sometimes the most profound turning points are silent, occurring in the dirt while the world watches in horror. If this moment of injustice resonates with you, it's worth reflecting on how often the truth is hidden in plain sight, and perhaps sharing that reflection in the comments below. The silence that followed the click of the handcuffs was broken by a sound Whitman didn't expect: the synchronized roar of 3 black Tahoes. They didn't glide to the curb, they jumped it, surrounding the patrol car in a tactical triangle. 6 men in FBI windbreakers hit the pavement before the vehicles had even stopped swaying. Leading them was Special Agent in Charge Holloway, a man whose face looked like it was carved from granite. He didn't look at Whitman, he looked at Marcus, still pinned to the ground. "Officer, get your knee off my senior special agent." "Now," Holloway commanded. Whitman's face went from flushed red to a ghostly, translucent white. He looked at the overturned chair, then at the badge Holloway was holding. The cloning beacon had finished its job. The data was already sitting on Holloway's tablet. Every bribe, every threat, every sin Whitman had committed. 2 days later, the lighting in the precinct's interrogation room was harsh, designed to strip away lies. Brian Whitman sat in the chair, his uniform replaced by a drab jumpsuit, his hands cuffed to the table. The door buzzed open and Marcus Johnson entered. He wasn't in the wheelchair. He moved slowly, his braced legs moving with a mechanical stiffness, supported by a heavy carbon fiber cane. The thud of the cane against the floor was the only sound. Marcus sat across from the man who had broken him on the sidewalk. For the first time, Whitman saw the hunter in repose in full clarity. Marcus didn't look angry, he looked disappointed. He laid a file on the table, a map of Whitman's corruption that spanned 3 years and 4 different precincts. The hunter had finally cornered his prey, and the silence in the room felt like a physical weight. "You think you're a part of a brotherhood, Brian?" Marcus asked, his voice a low, melodic rumble. "You think Miller and Judge Price are going to hold the line for you?" Marcus slid a second tablet across the table. It showed a video feed of an adjacent room where Whitman's partner was already signing a confession, his face streaked with tears. "They've already sold you, Brian. Price is claiming she was coerced by your squad. Miller is saying you were the mastermind behind the seizure tax. You're the sacrificial lamb for a system that's currently being dismantled stone by stone." Whitman's lip quivered. The wall of silence he had relied on wasn't just cracking, it was being demolished. He realized then that Marcus hadn't just been a victim. He had been the architect of this entire collapse. The mahogany walls of Courtroom 4B felt like a tomb. Judge Eleanor Price, usually the one handing out sentences, sat in the gallery, her own indictment pending. At the bench, Judge Reynolds looked down at Whitman with a coldness that suggested no mercy was forthcoming. Marcus sat in the front row, his posture perfect, his eyes fixed on the scales of justice above the judge's head. "Officer Whitman," Judge Reynolds began, "you took an oath to protect the vulnerable. Instead, you used your power to humiliate a man who has given more to this country than you could ever conceive." As the sentence of 15 years was read aloud, Marcus felt a deep, resonant sense of closure. Before we witness the final step of this journey, we must recognize the weight of the integrity we've watched Marcus defend. It is a rare thing to see a man stand so tall while the world tries to bring him low. Thank you for honoring this story with your attention. It is a shared investment in the truth that we truly value. 1 year later, the Charleston sun was warm on Marcus's shoulders as he sat at the same corner of the daily grind. The wheelchair was there, but the daily grind felt different now. The air was clearer. A young woman in a crisp, new police uniform approached him. It was Sarah, the barista who had watched the world break on this very sidewalk. She had traded her apron for a badge, her eyes reflecting the same steady fire she had seen in Marcus. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy, brass-edged coin, his original FBI challenge coin. He pressed it into her hand. "Never let the badge feel light, Sarah," he whispered. "The moment it loses its weight is the moment you start to drift." Sarah nodded, her hand closing tightly over the metal. As she walked away to start her first patrol, Marcus picked up his coffee. It was black, no sugar. And for the first time in a long time, it was perfectly peaceful.